Ever since I was a child, I always had a crippling fear of doctors. You may wonder why these individuals were here only to heal us, mend us. Ignoring slight hiccups in medical practice, everything they did was beneficial. And yet, I could not even be in the same room as one without shivering, without the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. Maybe it's because I'm squeamish, I would tell myself. Perhaps it was because my young mind linked pain and illness to them. It would make sense to a child. Since you go to the doctors when you aren't feeling well, maybe they were the ones that caused it. Of course, this didn't help my fear at all. It probably served to perpetuate it further. But it gave me a small comfort that there was a reason, a rational explanation for having such an irrational fear. But in reality, it was because of the nightmares. From the age of 8, I suffered horrific dreams, all of which were based in a specific hospital. Unlike your usual sterile building, where smiling nurses would escort patients suffering from all kinds of ailments to the correct rooms to be treated, it was disgusting. The place seemed abandoned, the walls stained with dark brown over the peeling, sun-bleached walls that have turned to a sickly ivory color. The ceiling tiles were damaged, exposing the pipes and cables above. Some snaked down, broken and sparking, only to add to the decrepit nature of the place. The furniture was torn and scattered across the floor, if present at all. All of the halls and rooms were poorly lit, as if the backup power was being used to keep the place lit. What made the dream even more unnerving was that the hospital seemed familiar, as if I had been there before, and that it wasn't just some place in my head. The second floor of the hospital, and some elements of the main entrance and stairwells, bore an uncanny resemblance to a hospital I went to when I was younger for a checkup. It would make sense that this would be the case. Dreams are based very loosely off of what has happened to you, and then are distorted as your brain sifts through the information. But it wasn't the hospital that frightened me. It wasn't the walls or the ceilings that caused me to wake in fits of shivering and screams. It was what was in the dream with me that frightened me the most. The creature was tall, gangly, and seemed to have an aura of filth surrounding him. He wore a long, stained coat, similar if not identical to those worn by a doctor. It was closed mostly, but underneath he wore a brown waistcoat made of leather and long black trousers with pointed black shoes, much like that of a suit. His hands were covered in large black rubber gloves. His right glove had syringes strapped to the tops of his fingers, with long, cruel spikes where different hues of green and brown liquid dripped. They were linked to canisters on his back, long sections of translucent tubing connecting them to his fingers. But his face, or lack thereof, was the most terrifying. He wore a mask made of browning leather, with 2 large metal rings and thick, green lenses where the eyes would be. Instead of a nose, a long beak protruded from the mask, with a barbed end. The mask covered his face entirely, strapped onto his head. The rest of his head was covered with a black veil, over which the straps were tied, and a small tricorn hat, made of the same material as his trousers, also black. He would stalk me through my dreams, slowly pacing his way towards me, a distorted chuckle seeping from his mask. I could run as fast as I wanted. I could even try to get out of the hospital. But the doors were always locked, and he would always find me. No matter where I hid, no matter where I ran, he would catch me in his left hand. He would hold me up to his lenses and would seem to inspect me. He would then run his beak over me, before cackling and spearing me with his syringe glove, injecting me with poison and plague. I could feel myself rotting from the inside out, foaming at the mouth. And then I would scream. And then I would wake up. For years, he tormented me. I couldn't sleep without him tainting my dreams. I couldn't daydream without him haunting my thoughts. It got to the point where my parents were even worried about me. I would be sent to psychiatrist after psychiatrist, and each time they would just prescribe the same old pills. Antidepressants and sleeping pills were the most common, and all they did were make me think about him even more. I decided to name him when I was 10 after doing a project about the Black Death. I ended up settling with the plague doctor. His mask resembled that of those old healers, and much like them, he wasn't a doctor at all. He was a quack. He never helped anyone. He only aided the spread of disease and was a harbinger of despair. As the years passed, my terrors slowly subsided, getting gradually less and less intense. Though he never left me completely, less of my dreams would be centered around the hospital. Some nights I could even get a decent rest without being interrupted by his presence. He never truly left me, but I could finally go to sleep and not have to worry about being trapped in that building anymore. You may be wondering why I'm telling you this now. Why am I telling you about this night terror? About the phantasm that has caused me so much pain? Why am I telling you if I seem to have gotten over it so well, to the point that he no longer haunts my thoughts? The answer is simple. Really, I saw him in real life. But he wasn't wearing his long coat, or his cruel glove, or his concealing mask. Now he wore a suit, a ring, and an aged grin. He wasn't tall and thin anymore. He had become shorter and stouter and older. When I first walked in here, it was for a routine checkup. Don't you remember? When I came into the practice, and I locked my gaze with yours, I could see something staring in your eyes, and then you cracked the slightest of grins. And then I realized why you smiled, and it made me scream. I had seen you before. I had seen you when I was a child. Much like now, I was just going in for a routine checkup. That was all. I was just there to have a few injections. Back then, I didn't really have an issue with doctors, only needles, and I was confident in myself. I told my dad that I could do this on my own. So he dropped me off at the hospital and said he would meet me at the diner across the street whilst he did some shopping. I went through the main entrance, climbed the stairs, and made my way to your room at the end of the hall. When I sat down, you asked where my parents were. Do you remember? I saw no reason to lie. You were a doctor after all, a good man. So I told you that they weren't here, that I was doing this all by myself. And you nodded and went to lock the door. And then you grinned at me, like you did when I came for my checkup. And then you injected me. You tied me down and filled me with your poison. I was sick after what you did to me. And then, after you had cleaned me up, and yourself, that if I ever told my parents or anyone about what happened to me here, you would kill my dad. And then you chuckled and sent me on my way. You aren't a doctor. You're a quack, a fake. You didn't help me. You destroyed me. I was sent out of that room a different child. And within me the seeds of my nightmares germinated, and so it blossomed. The plague doctor is your avatar, an image my mind came up with when to shield me from things I could not understand. It was the horrible monster that would capture me, laugh at me, inject me, poison me. You took my life that day and created an abomination. Well, it seems both of us have limited time now. I can hear the sirens outside just as well as you. I guess you take the law more seriously now you're nearly retired. But that won't change what I'm about to do. Now I'm going to slay this beast. I'm going to kill the plague doctor once and for all. And maybe then I can get a good night's sleep. My grandmother would always tell me ghost stories when I was a young boy. She would tell me why I would always wake up at 3 a.m. with a heavy weight on my chest, or why I would hear the walls creak in the winter. Now that I'm older, I know that these stories of hers could be explained with things like sleep paralysis or the heat coming on in an old house. But there was one story she told me that I have yet to debunk. Never wander off alone on a cold winter night, she would say. To anyone with half a brain, this should already be obvious for many different reasons, none of which are supernatural. However, when she continued with her cautionary tale, the consequences were not what you might have expected. For if you stray away from your family and friends, you will fall victim to the snow, and he will find you. Who I asked in a shaky voice. He who breathes tainted life into what has long since perished. The necromancer who lives beneath the ice. What will he do? What he does is unspeakably horrific. She said, her mouth twisting up into a sinister grin. When he finds you, wandering alone in his domain, he will pierce your heart with his cold, icy claws. But the nightmare does not end here. After you are dead, he will bring you back as his undead slave, a cold, mindless zombie, a white. This is typically where my parents would step in and tell my grandmother she was scaring me. She would continue with these stories up until the day she died, but never did admit to any of them being fiction. When I got older, my grandmother's stories began to fade into the back of my mind. In truth, I never really thought about them at all, until recently. I was a junior in college and lived with my girlfriend at the time, Jessica, in a small apartment in northern Massachusetts. During winter break, we decided to go on a ski trip together. Nothing fancy, just a weekend trip. As we were packing the last of our gear into my car, my girlfriend hesitated for a moment. Is everything okay? I asked, thinking that maybe she was having second thoughts. Yay, I'm fine, she said. It's just, someone said something really weird to me in class the other day, and it's just been bugging me. I turned to her after making sure the last of our belongings were safely in the trunk. Can you tell me what? I'm sure it's nothing to worry about. She looked up. They told me that those mountains are haunted by a girl that died there a couple of years ago. It took me a moment to think about what she said. It was true that a young girl did go missing a few years back, and one of her friends was later found dead, but I had never heard any ghost stories involving the incident or those mountains. Don't let them scare you, I said with a smile. They probably just wanted some attention. She looked at me, reassured, and gave me a kiss. I guess you're right. After all, I have you to protect me. With that, I gave her a hug, and we were on our way. We reached our destination after a couple of hours. It had begun to snow, but nothing that would hinder our ability to ski. After a quick lunch, we headed out to complete our first run of the day. When we got to the top of the ski lift, we made our way to a trail marked with a green square. Ready to go? I asked, readjusting my goggles. Lead the way, Jessica replied. Just stop halfway down in case I fall behind. The trail wasn't challenging at all, but I figured we might have wanted to start off easy. After all, neither of us had skied in over 2 years, so I was convinced we'd be rusty. It was just like riding a bike. After I got the hang of it again, I was finding every little bump I could to jump off. Since it was a beginner trail, though, they were hard to find. I slid to a stop at the halfway point. Jessica was nowhere in sight. I knew she was a strong skier, so wasn't really worried about her falling or getting hurt on such an easy run. 10 minutes passed, no Jessica. 20 minutes passed, still no Jessica. After a half an hour of waiting, I knew something was seriously wrong. I took my skis off and walked up the mountain. There was no sign of her at all. Nobody even looked concerned like they might have if they saw her crash. It was almost as if she just vanished. With no luck, I put my skis back on and returned to the lodge. I told staff what happened, but even after hours of searching, even they couldn't find her. I felt like I was living in a bad dream. This was the kind of thing that happened in movies, but never in real life. Before it got too dark, I decided to try my luck and search by the woods near the lodge. Jessica, I yelled. Jessica, where are you? No answer. I was blinded by my determination, and before I knew it, I was so deep into the snow and trees I had no idea how to get back. It started to get dark. I was scared, not only for what might have happened to my girlfriend, but for myself. I was lost in the woods at night during the winter. I was an adult and was taught to believe in logic, but for some reason, I couldn't get my dead grandmother's voice out of my head. Never wander off alone on a cold winter night. For if you stray away from your family and friends, you will fall victim to the snow, and he will find you. I felt like I was going insane. Why was I so scared of this made-up creature more than something that made sense, like lack of food or a wild animal? All of a sudden, I heard a soft voice that brought me back to reality. I'm cold, it said. For a second, I thought maybe it was Jessica. Jessica, is that you? I should have run. I should have got out of those woods as soon as I felt the fear manifest inside my chest. I'm cold, the voice repeated, only this time, it was louder. It wasn't Jessica. The voice sounded ethereal. I felt like a small animal trapped in cage, just waiting for my inevitable demise. It was then that I locked eyes with a young girl. For a moment, time stood still, and the world seemed to go quiet. The girl was wearing a long coat and what looked like a beret. Her hair was short and blended in with the snow. What shook me to my core, though, were her eyes. They were nothing but black sockets with glowing blue orbs in the middle. If it wasn't for the eerie blue light they emitted, I would have never seen the body crumpled in a heap in front of her. It was Jessica. Jessica, I choked and fell backwards onto a nearby tree trunk. My whole body was numb. I truly felt as though this was the end. But the girl never moved. She just stood there above Jessica's body, those horrible blue lights not once taking their gaze off me. I stumbled, regaining feeling in my legs, and started running. I had no idea where I was or if I would get out alive. Eventually, by some miracle, I made it out of those woods to the lodge. I told the police what I saw that night. Well, some of what I saw anyways. I left out the part about the girl. They found Jessica's body but never released a report of what caused her death. I took a semester off after the incident. My professors were understanding and told me to take care of myself. It's been a year since all of this happened. I'm doing well in school and even managed to land a part-time job at the cafe by my apartment. People think I'm crazy when I tell them what I truly believe is lurking in those mountains, and frankly, I don't blame them. So for the fun of it, I'll tell you my theory. That girl who went missing was the one I saw that night, standing over Jessica's body. She fell victim to the snow and he found her. He who breathes tainted life into what has long since perished. The necromancer who lives beneath the ice. What he did was unspeakably horrific. When he found her, wandering alone in his domain, he pierced her heart with his cold, icy claws. But the nightmare did not end there. After she died, he brought her back as his undead slave. A cold, mindless zombie. A white. There is a banana lady in every town. You might have to look for her, but I would advise against this. She is not someone you would like to meet. You may find her on a less popular side street in your neighborhood. She is always facing the opposite direction from where you are approaching. She sits on one of those medical rollators, dressed in a white nightgown. Her fingers are short and stubby, and they are always peeling a rotten banana. They're her favorite. I found ours by mistake. I live in a quiet suburb in northern Florida. The winters are cold here, lacking the typical sunshine of our southern neighbors. I work in an office about 15 minutes from home. I live alone, and that is how I like it. My days off are spent relaxing, reading, writing, watching movies, avoiding all human contact if possible. I have a simple, boring life, and I had every intention of keeping it that way. Until I found her. I was driving home from work one evening in early January. It was about 50 degrees and raining hard, and since it was a Friday, I was racing to get my weekend started as soon as possible. I sped up to get through a yellow light at an intersection about 2 blocks from my house. To this day, I regret how anxious I was to get there. I was so close, and if I had slowed down for the light, maybe none of this would have happened. Maybe I never would have found her. My little 99 Corolla hydroplaned in the middle of the intersection. I panicked and swerved to the right, running my car up onto a curb and sliding down the sidewalk of one of the neighborhood side streets. The car came to a stop just before ramming into a lamppost, narrowly missing extensive front-end damage and probably hurting me as well. That would have been the least of my concerns. I was fine, save for a spell of heavy breathing and a few "oh my gods." As I sat on the sidewalk and watched the rain continue to pelt my windshield, I realized I had never been to this area of the neighborhood before, which wasn't strange since I didn't get out much. I looked out my passenger side window and saw several large houses looking over me on a small hill. They seemed to go on forever, each with perfect lawns and perfect little fences, and not a single light on in any of them. This was odd, especially because it was only about 7, but even more alarmingly for the lack of assistance if I had caused a commotion or was seriously injured. The rain was dying down now, and I turned to look out my windshield. Somewhere further down the street, I spotted a shape in the middle of the next intersection. It was too small to be a car, maybe a motorcycle, but I thought I could definitely see the shape of a person sitting on whatever it was. I still have no idea what compelled me to do what I did next. In a split-second decision, I got out of my car and started walking towards the shape in the road. I think part of me wanted to be a hero. If it was someone who had wrecked, just as I almost dramatically did, I wanted to be there to help, as no one seemed to be around to do for me. I left my car where it was and walked, slowly in the yellow light of a single lamppost and the cold, light drizzle of rain. As I approached the intersection, the shape became very, very clear. It was one of those medical rollators, dark gray and worn, and a tennis ball where one of the wheels should have been. I didn't think until much later how the thing could have moved at all without the 4th wheel. It was stopped directly underneath the traffic light. Not a soul was around. No cars, no people, no lights on in the houses. I began to feel increasingly uncomfortable, and even more so when I saw what was sitting there. It appeared to be an old lady, hunched over, with her back to me. She wore a long, white nightgown that hung to the wet road and was soggy and dripping at the bottom. She had a short bob of silver hair and dark liver spots all over her neck and what I could see of her arms. But then I noticed more of the details. More disturbing features. Her ears were incredibly large, half ovals that took up most of her head. Her fingers were short and stubby, but claw-like, and working feverishly in front of her. I approached her from the side for a better look, and saw her fingers peeling back a banana. It was entirely black and rotten, and gave off a sweet sickly smell that made me nauseous. She took off the black peel and tossed it aside, then jammed the rotten mush into her face, ravenously chomping it and smushing it all over her mouth. I forgot where I was. I forgot about my car, about the rain, about standing in the middle of an intersection where there should have been tons of cars passing through. I was in a trance, watching her feed on this disgusting banana, and all the while she paid no attention to me. I knew she knew I was there, for at my angle anyone could have seen me, but she was so focused on eating that she did not bother to look in my direction. I continued to watch as she licked the rotten juice off her stubby fingers and wiped the residue from her lips. And as soon as the banana was completely gone, she reached into a brown satchel at her side and pulled out an equally disgusting banana, repeating the process over again. I watched her for probably 10 minutes without saying a word. She must have eaten 20 or 30 bananas in that span, all one after another, never tiring or giving any indication that she had enough. It was like she was satisfying a hunger, a ravenous hunger for rotten bananas, as if all her energy relied on them. I decided that this had gone on for too long. I stepped closer to her, which was a mistake, and spoke to her, which was an even bigger mistake. Mom, I said, trying my best to sound like I had normal concern for an old lady in the road, and not the kind as if I were concerned with someone eating like that. She stopped. Mid-bite, she paused with rotten glob in hand and turned to look at me. I now saw her face, that hideous face that has haunted me ever since. Her large ears were brown and hairy, covered in a dark fuzz. Her face was equally hairy, and her cheeks a pale yellow and stuffed with food. But it was those eyes I will not soon forget. They were strikingly white, almost glowing, burning like white flames and staring into my soul. I was frozen, looking into these eyes and seeing a raging fire burning bright behind them. I saw all the traumatic events of my childhood: my mother storming out, my father drinking himself to death, my best friend being killed in a car accident. But then I realized that the last one had never happened. My best friend Brian and I were heading to the midnight premiere of a movie that night, one of the few times I welcomed human interaction. He was alive and well. I looked further into her eyes. I saw my car, crushed and mangled and rammed head-on into a lamppost. I was outside the car looking in, where my friend Brian was in the passenger seat, his face torn and bloody. And then I saw fire. I saw white flames engulfing the vehicle and heard Brian's screams of agony as he was burned alive, trapped inside, and there was nothing I could do. And then everything faded away. The flames turned black and I was moving backwards, further away from the car, my hands extended to try and reach the door to pull Brian to safety. Everything was dark. I woke up in the street, my head pounding with an incredible ache and my clothes soaked in water. I lay on my back, staring up at a traffic light, the rain falling steadily. I sat up and looked ahead, and there was no sign of the banana lady. There were lights on in the houses and people watching me from their lawns, people running to me from their cars. I heard shouts of concern and shouts of panic. I was dizzy. I saw more people coming towards me and yelling, "Are okay? Are you okay?" But just as many were running right by me. I turned my head slowly, looking back down the street, back to where my car had run up on the curb and narrowly missed a lamppost. It was still on the curb, with a massive crowd surrounding it. And it was burning. My husband and I are on a vacation, and it's just ... shit is getting weird. At first everything was perfection, and we were having the time of our lives. We booked a special room at an all-inclusive resort. Jacuzzi bath for two, personal heated swimming pool, lake balcony view, this place nice. The first night we stayed here was bliss until late in the night. The bed is soft but comfortable, the pool isn't too chlorinated, and we gave both a trial run. It's a romantic getaway after all, so there's going to be lots of nookie. We exhausted ourselves in the pool, moved to the bed, and after a good amount of fun we both passed out hard. If only the rest of the week could have gone so smoothly. The trouble started later that night when my husband took his first picture of our room. I got a very rude awakening from my hubby in the middle of the night. He was shaking me and yelling my name in a panicked high voice I had never heard before. Once I shook off the fog of sleep, I was able to see he was pale as a sheet and totally freaked out about something. He yanked on me until I got out of bed and pretty much dragged me downstairs to the pool area. He kept babbling about seeing me dead in the water in a picture he took. I couldn't make sense of what he was talking about until he showed me. I have a very distinctive tattoo and hair, and in the picture he took it absolutely looks like I'm floating in the pool face down dead as a doornail. He had gotten up because he just couldn't sleep. He had gone up to the sitting area to play on his computer a bit when he noticed how pretty the pool was looking down. He snapped a pic with his phone to share, but when he looked at the picture on his phone, it showed me dead in the pool. He started to race down the stairs, but before he could get to the pool, he saw me still asleep in bed. He thought maybe he was hallucinating, but the proof was right there on his phone. That's when he came to wake me up in a panic. When we got to the pool area, there wasn't anything there. No body, no doppelganger, no evidence of anybody getting in or out of the pool. WTF. So to better explain the layout of the room we are staying in, it's 3 levels. The pool, shower, and toilet is downstairs, the bedroom with a jacuzzi bath, and the balcony is in the middle. Then there's a living area with a fireplace. A blue skylight over the pool with a clear floor overlooking the pool is upstairs walkout level. It's pretty swanky if outdated, but realistically it's just fun to get away for a few days to a couples only place. We had been to other places similar to it, but not this particular one before. You can't really see the bed from upstairs, but you can see the pool through all the floors thanks to the windows and clear floor. We tried to make sense of things, but there's just no rationalizing something like that. We checked the pool again, and I took pictures with my phone and nothing showed up. He took another picture and there it was, my body. Needless to say, I'm freaked out at this point. We talk about switching rooms because now I'm terrified to sleep in this room. We talked to the office after a sleepless night, and since it was a relatively off-season time, we were able to switch rooms. Still a little shaken up, my DH took a picture of the pool, exact same room setup, just a different one, and fortunately it was just the pool. After trying to calm down and relax in the new room, I took a Xanax and laid down for a nap. I was still a little freaked out, but I was also exhausted. My DH tried to game a bit, but he just couldn't get the pictures out of his mind, so he started taking pictures around the room to see if he could trigger whatever happened. Unfortunately for both of us, he did capture another disturbing picture. This one was me laying naked and drowned in the jacuzzi bath. Obviously, I'm not sharing that one, so clearly it wasn't the room. Something in this place was showing me dead in various ways, and we couldn't figure out WTF was going on. By this time, my DH is truly freaked out and scared, and I'm right there with him. He wanted to cut our vacation short, but I told him whatever was causing this might want that. We should just be really careful and just avoid him taking pictures. We had a bit of a row over it, because he really didn't want to stay here anymore, and I worked too hard to make this vacation happen. He finally gave in and made me promise I wouldn't get in the pool or jacuzzi bath without him nearby so nothing bad would happen to me. He's so sweet, he even sat in the pool room when I wanted to swim a bit, and he didn't. Honestly, he wouldn't even get in the pool at all with me. Our last night, we had a wonderful dinner. I convinced him to have a cocktail to help him unwind and loosen up. After 3 very stiff drinks, he was feeling pretty good and really liked my makeup, so without thinking, he whipped out his phone and snapped a picture of me. When he went to look at it, he stopped cold and appeared to sober up fast. I didn't appear dead. I didn't appear in the picture at all. It was just a black background with stark white words, "It's too late." That's when he lost all the color in his face and dropped his phone, racing to get to the bathroom. I jumped up following him and asking what was wrong. He started throwing up before he made it to the restroom, and within minutes he was dead. It was a heart attack, they said. They did an autopsy on him and found extreme damage to his heart. At first, the resort assumed it was food poisoning or alcohol poisoning. Everyone was so kind to me as I cried and cried. It was supposed to be me. I was the one that was supposed to die. I got his phone and tried to show them the pictures, but they were all mysteriously gone. I did have the very first one on my phone, but that didn't prove anything. I went home heartbroken, following the hearse that was bringing him home with me. Nobody suspected me. I'm so glad, because had they had any inkling I poisoned his last drink with aconite, I would be totally screwed. I don't know what force was trying to warn him, but I'm so glad I convinced him to stay. I managed to kill him on the anniversary of our baby's accidental drowning. He was supposed to be watching her, but his stupid phone was so goddamn important to him, he left her alone in the bathtub to get it. She drowned before he came back in the room, supposedly. She was only 8 months old. She couldn't have drowned that fast without either negligence or malice, and he had never filled the tub all the way before like he did that day. He deserved what he got, and I'm not sorry. We both have life insurance and were each other's sole recipients that we got over 2 years ago. He insisted we both get life insurance after our baby passed away, but failed to mention she was insured. He had a life insurance policy on my baby girl that paid double for accidental death that I didn't know about until the paperwork came through. It was the last of my baby's life insurance that I set aside and saved to book this vacation. Like I said, I worked way too hard to get this vacation. I wasn't going to let some well-meaning force stop me from doing what needed to be done. Yes, I killed the man who killed my baby. I don't know if something was trying to warn him, or maybe he planned to kill me on this vacation. But either way, I got the bastard. I can't have any other children myself because my labor was horrible, and I'm now barren. I'll find myself a good partner and adopt when I'm ready. Maybe in a different country with better laws to protect children from greedy fathers who like money more than infants. I'm gonna get a cover-up tattoo for my back, so don't think you'll be able to find me now. He was cremated and I scattered his ashes myself, so it's not like anything can be proven with his body. I'm going to try to move on with my life now, but I'll always keep her pictures close. At least I forged my own justice for her death.